All right, I have 10 o'clock, so thank you for joining. This is, in case you are in the wrong webinar, this is the purchasing expense webinar. My name's Sherry Blanche, and I'm happy to have so many of you joining today. So just a little bit of before we get started, if you do have questions, I'll try to answer those during the webinar. Some of those, depending on how in depth they need answered, I might have you reach out to your account manager to get some further calls and instructions on more specific details if you need. Let me know if you could, what your questions are in the Q&A versus chat. I will try to look at chat now and then, but I have the Q&A panel open to really answer questions as I can. And I may also hold off on some if I'm going to be going through those throughout the webinar. And also let me know if, if you're having any issues with the sound. I think my volumes, I had some confirmed that you can hear me. Let me know if you need some lower or higher volume, and appreciate everyone joining today. So I'm going to go over really some high level information about adding expenses, various types of expenses into projects, and then, there may be overhead expenses. So we're really going over just, again, tracking expense items in various ways. I did just want to show you as well, either from your login. Here you can click on the more to open up the help guide and search for purchasing. So this will open that. I did just open the link here. So I'm also going to really be covering these main things of purchase orders, estimating expenses, vendor invoices, credit cards, miscellaneous costs, and that sort of tracking of expenses. So I did just open up my site currently to the purchasing today. If you really, now you might be landing on different pages, that's just based on your default. But if you needed to know how I got here, it's just from the main menu and then purchasing and purchasing today. Now you might be just in an actual project to be really adding expenses. You might be a standard user that's just entering an expense report. So we'll be navigating to the various places that we'll be using today. But this really is the main purchasing area that really leads to all the vendor expenses, orders, credit card charges, even though there's a multitude of other ways to get to adding these. So, of course, as with every area, there are specific security settings that relate to what you can do related to purchasing, adding expenses, and so forth. So again, if you need help with adjusting any security settings, system settings that you might see a little different than what I go over today, just reach out to your account manager and we'd be happy to help set up some additional calls with you more specific to your needs. But you can see on the purchasing today that it really highlights for me a lot of things that I need to pay attention to. Open orders, unapproved items, credit card charges, and so forth. So we will be going through a few of these areas, but what I'm really going to start with is estimating expenses related to a project. So I did open up this project to show some of that information. So typically we recommend, if you have client projects, to estimate what both the labor and the expenses. So what I did is I started this estimate. It's not yet approved, but it's simply coming in to say, well, what expenses do we expect on this project? Um, and what item. So I've already added a few in here, but what we'll see is you can just simply add a line for what expenses you might be expecting. And when you search for the item list, you're going to see several different types of expense items that are set up in your system setup by one of your admin. You have your purchase item list. You'll also see, and you can see kind of the grayed area. You'll also see media items if you're using the actual media module. Now, some don't, so they actually put some media just for estimating in that up here in the purchasing. So don't be surprised if yours looks different than mine. That's okay. And then we'll also see down here some expense report items that if you're using employee expense reports for reimbursing them versus maybe a corporate credit card. Some use a combination of those two things, but these are specifically items that are set up just for employee expense reports to reimburse them. So we're going to be showing how to enter those actual items based on what it actually is. But I just came in and I just added a few details. Now, another thing that we can discuss, and I won't go deep into the setup, but you can also set up the project to default markup. So it can look at the actual items that are entered here to determine markup information. It can come from the item setup. It can come from a client, setup and default to say, well, I just have a different markup based on the client. So the markup can be, coming in automatically based on some of the system setup of where do we look to get the markup, or do we just enter what markup we want at the time that we enter it, and we just calculate them based on the net and the markup, what our gross amount might be. So I'll just change that. We'll have one that has no markup. For things like mileage, it can even have a standard rate or cost that populates based on, just pre-populating the net amount based on the quantity. So there are different ways to set up the system so that it's automated so that you don't have to be picking those things manually each time. So again, the project setup can also relate to, where do we look for our markup information, project item, rate sheet, or other. So again, if you need help with any of those setup areas, let us know and we'll help go through that. Um, so I'm in here, I have estimated expenses. And what you'll see, there are some that even come in also if these aren't yet approved, and we have an option, and I'm not going to go into the details of this, but just to point out that we do have even the ability to send out requests for quotes. So if you do get bids on certain things, there are abilities to send that out electronically to vendors to reply and then update your estimate information based on some quotes that you get. And again, that's deeper than we're going to go into today, but I do like to highlight some of the features that are available in the system for that. And that is one nice automated system to quickly get bids and then even multiple quantities, and then you can get the replies and just simply update your estimate based on the information that they provide to you. So that's even before this estimate is approved. Now your estimates become your budget, and it is good also because then you can be tracking what did we estimate for these things in the project versus what did the actuals come in as. So same with the labor. So once we come in and we estimate those and we approve this, now the other ability that we have, once we have approved estimated expenses, is I can also come in here now to the estimate and I can actually create my orders. If I'm using purchase orders, I can create those from an approved estimate. So once I approve that, it gives me the ability to come in and just set who the vendor is that I might want to use, and I can, find the, vendors, and then just simply create I don't know which ones I want to use here. I'll use consulting. Maybe I think I put in a FedEx. I can come in and I can simply, I'm actually going to make this one the same vendor. I'm going to make this both the print vendor, but I can come in and I can just say, I have these approved. I'm ready to go. The client signed off on it. We've approved these estimated expenses. So I'm just simply going to, if I need to, create an actual purchase order to send out to the vendors, um, electronically or other. So what that does is it just actually pre-fills the orders for me. If I look here now, I can see that I have a purchase order, and all it did was take my approved estimated amounts and it just filled in my order automatically. So you don't have to rekey anything. And it's really a nice handy feature to just create the orders right from here. And the orders can become a billable item to the client, or you might wait till you get your vendor invoices in to then reconcile those to these orders. That's up to you. Um, but you can see that I'm going to show you where they show up in the project as actual transactions. If I print these orders before they're approved, it automatically puts in there that it's a draft. There are some details that you can put on there in the system setup for standard header and footer text if you need. There's again some additional automated ways to have these pre-populate the information that you need to with as much detail as you need for those purchase orders. Now, the approval of purchase orders, since they are what we consider a contract to the vendor of what we expect to be purchasing from them and at what price, they do have an approval process. The list of who can approve these is based on the employee setup and who has the amount, what limit do these people have to approve, and then it looks at the actual order amount, and it may change based on the amount of the order. So if we have an order that's a higher amount, this list of available approvers may change because you might have some that can approve an order for a smaller amount and then some that approve orders for a larger amount of money. So that is, again, an employee setup. Same with, and we're not going to go into the media orders, the actual media module orders, but they're very similar to purchase orders. They're a contract, and there is order limits on those. Now, there is a question about, are there separate POs for the vendor or are they combined? They would combine into one order per vendor. So I did, let's see, I think it was this print vendor that I chose to select the same vendor for. So it just created one order. So it knew that this was the same, detail. Now you can manually create orders as well. And, but this is what we like to show because often you are budgeting and approving those budgets. So it's just quick and easy to just create them from the approved estimate. But yes, this one is the one vendor that it just added each line for the items that I'm purchasing, and it just automated that order one per vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and approve these. You can see in here that any that I created from the estimate just came into the project area here. I did also want to show in the budget because I had approved the estimate. Now I have some orders created related to that estimate that now if I open up the project budget, we can see down here as well that I now have some open order amounts. So I not only have a budget and these budgeted amounts, but I also have some additional details that I can click into to see, well, what is the actual amount that I now have. Now you can see here that I estimated this, and these are, I can expand these a little more. This is your project budget area. Of course, there's the global project budget analysis across all projects, but this is really what did we estimate and what did the actuals come in at? And is there any difference between those that you can be tracking to see that information quickly? These can be viewed by type, by item, and again, this can also be customized by your admin by changing the grid settings that you want to see or not see based on what's being budgeted and now what do we actually have in the project. So a good place to quickly see, um, you know, where our actuals are coming in at. There are also budget related notifications that people can receive over budget or within a certain amount of the budget per item, per task, per whatever it might be. So those are employee notifications that can be set up. And of course, if we're on a project view, we can also quickly see things that are starting to get close to what we budgeted. If we're out here on the main project manager page, I'm just going to open this in a new tab, holding down I'm on a Mac, by the way, using Firefox, but I'm going to hold down my control key to have multiple tabs open to different areas. Um, but if we search for that expense webinar, I can also be tracking my budget here. So that is why we recommend going ahead and creating those approved estimates to quickly see anytime we start going over what we budgeted across the board. All right, so we have our orders. I'm going to go ahead and also, if I look at this one that I approved, by the way, these are not yet approved or sent for approval if it's being sent to somebody else. So that, just like all transactions, time or expenses, that will determine what can we do later with billing. So only approved, if I look here, the others are unapproved. I can't do things billing wise unless things go through that approval process. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and approve everything today. So I do have another question. How do you add another tab if you are not? Oh, okay. So to navigate to another tab on a PC, you hold down your control key and keep it held down as you navigate. And on the Mac, it's Command to navigate and open in a new tab. So yeah, you can even hold it down to when you're searching like if I wanted to keep the project open in a new tab, I can also hold down my key. So those are also, by the way, under your Platinum tips and tricks if you want some more help with navigating in Platinum. You can also have an area open here and you can use your Shift key to also go to a different area. And, maybe, well, let me go to something else. Open using the Shift key, just open on top of where you are without a new tab. So those are a couple little quick tips. All right, so I have my project open, my purchasing today, and now I also have kind of a project page, which I'm going to close. I don't need too many tabs open. All right, so what I did want to make sure is that I approved these other orders. So again, once I approve them, what you can see as well is that pre-bill. Now I'm not going to go into the billing, but this is what again makes this even a contracted pre-billable transaction to the client. So again, some use advance bill instead of pre-billing orders, but you can actually bill this line by line or based on that. And again, now if I print this, since it's approved, that draft is gone. So that quickly removes that draft. You can add and notify a vendor person so that once this gets approved, they get an email that, this has been approved if you want. And there are also ways to quickly add spec sheets that you have. So if we have specific specifications already on the project, which I did previously, I can also add those to the order so that when I send this to the vendor, they also have any specifications that we need to create that information or whatever we're ordering from them. So now, a lot of times a small shipping would not probably have a purchase order, but I went ahead and just did that today just for demonstrations. So now we have our purchase orders in. Now, one thing that we would do maybe a month down the road is we would then take the information from the order and we would just tie it back to the vendor invoice that we received. So I'm just going to step through that as well. So we're going to pretend that, it's a month later. I now receive that vendor invoice from that vendor and I'll just pick my print vendor. And what's nice about that is it automatically sees all open orders based on what vendor I entered. So again, I don't have to rekey anything. It just automatically finds that information for me. Now, if I come in and I also put in that project, and it's this one, I have a couple in there, then it also will decide, well, what order am I trying to tie this back to? And I think it's this 1200 one, it looks like. So when I do that and I put in my invoice number and I save that, it just automatically says, well, what are they invoicing you for? Are they invoicing you for that entire order? Is it just partial? Is it a different amount? And that's kind of a highlight to you. You can also narrow it down based on dates if you want, of the dates that we have on the order, or if it has more specific dates on other types of order lines that you search by. Obviously, if it's a little bit different amount than what we see here, it would trigger a highlight to us of, hey, wait a minute, this is what we ordered. Why are we being invoiced a different amount than what I see here? So if we come in and we say, well, they're invoicing us for, 6,000. Where's that variance? Why are we seeing more than what we ordered? That would be a highlight. Now, maybe you just created the order for the main information and you didn't put in the shipping. Well, that's fine. You can still decide, is it actually this amount or do I need to change the amount? And you select what they're actually invoicing you for. And it just saves that information on the vendor invoice and it ties it back to the order. Now, if it matches exactly, it would automatically close it, or you tell the system, well, if it is a different amount, do I just want to go ahead and close the order? Maybe it's a few pennies and you don't want to go back and edit the order, or you don't want to, it doesn't matter. That's up to you. Doesn't matter, yes or no, if it's a different amount. And is it minimal and somebody just forgot a few cents here and there or not? So that's you can close the order, or it would automatically do that if if it matched exactly and you saved it, it would also do that automatically. And you do have this last invoiced option too, which would close the order saying, if the amount doesn't match, that's fine. It's the last invoice that we're going to receive. So we want everything closed out of the order. But it makes it so that you don't have to re-enter all that information again because it just pulls it in from the order. Now, these can go through an approval process as well. Who approves these? There are specific rights of who can approve vendor invoices. And there are even some rights to say you can approve them if they are on your project, but not if they're on other projects that you don't belong to. So again, we can be controlling who approves this or who it defaults to as the approver. I made it simple for me. I get to approve everything. So once I approve this, and again, there are header details in here that automatically populated um, based on things that were already set up on the project and the order. But once I approve this, this now will show in the project when we come back to the project now and we review our billing that did show orders. Now we'll see this is in the status of a voucher. So while it was in a status of an order that could have been billed, pre-billed to the client, now I just say, no, I have the voucher. The voucher is already tied into the order. And what's nice is you can see immediately here in the actual vendor invoice that it's tied to that order. So everything gets linked. I have my order. Now I can see on the order that it's been applied to vendor invoices. And I can now see that information, and this is now closed out. I could reopen if there was a need to, but otherwise I don't need the order any longer because now I have my actual vendor expense in the system. Now, if we're out on purchasing as well, and we look through things, we'll now see that as once it's approved as a vendor invoice that's ready to pay. So if I come out here and I search all of them, or let's see, oh, I know, it's probably a due date that's a month out. So, well, maybe not. Oh, always fun to troubleshoot why my vendor invoice, I approved it. Due date is the 14th. Okay, well, I might have to troubleshoot that. Oh, and let me, I'll come in at least here and post to show you as well. If you have these expenses, and the nice thing is that your items automatically know what accounts to post to based on what are we purchasing. So you don't have to, those are already preset in your system to know what accounts do I want to post details to. And if I bill this back to the client, same thing. I know what sales accounts to use when I'm uh, based on the items that are on there. So let me just refresh and see if I can get my, well, we'll look at some other vendor invoices to pay as of. I should be able to see that. What do I have? Oh, expense reports only. No wonder. I'm going to do all regular invoices. So there we go. There's my vendor invoice. And we're going to look at this too because expense reports is the other item that we're going to go through, credit card charges. But I did have this set to look just for expense reports. So that was my bad. So if we did all, then we'd see everything regardless of what type of voucher it is. So any questions on the estimates, purchase orders, and vendor vouchers so far? Okay. And let me just double check chat. Oh, I do have and again, if you have questions, I do see one in chat. If you could use the QA, I'm looking more at that. I do have a question about an estimate layout. So yeah, that would be a more specific question to your account manager. I'm not going to go into the layouts and the templates right now, but you're correct that sometimes if you have the complex layouts and you have expenses only, you have to at least put in some labor for it to see that. So your account manager would be happy to help you with that, or you could use templates. So they could help you out with that question. Okay, so let me just, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and close chat. I do have another question. Can the purchase order only be issued from the estimate window? No, that's a great question. I can create a purchase order from just from scratch. So let me just go ahead and show that, because it is going to be one nice thing that if you say, well, I have another purchase order, I have something for consulting, and my project is my expense webinar, and I want to pick the right one. What's really nice, if you don't have it estimated, I can go ahead and just say, well, this is for maybe some contract services. I have an amount of maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to put 1,000 and maybe a 10% markup. What happens here, if I create one just from scratch, is it's nice because it shows you right here that you do not have a budget for this. So it's not going to stop you, but it will tell you you've entered an item that does not have an approved budget. It won't stop you from doing it, but it will give you that note to say, gee, maybe you need a change order, maybe you need to update your estimate so that your budget is in line with what you're actually creating, or maybe you just go over budget and that's fine. But it won't stop you from entering things that are not budgeted. So um, okay, so someone's asking about showing how the purchase order was created from the estimate. Yes, I can show you that again. If I come in here, let me just, let's see. I think I've created all of them here already, but what I did was I came here and I said create order from the top of the estimate that was approved to then select which items I wanted to create an order for. Now I have already created orders for these and they're already line by line. You can come in if you had a line that did not yet have an order, and you can just create from here. Now, again, I already have an existing one, but I could just come down to one line if I only wanted one order and I have it here and it's approved. I could also do it this way. So there's a couple of different ways to create that, just from the very top under more, or and select what you want to create the order for, or line by line. What about creating purchase order for office expenses operating? That's up to you. You certainly could. I'm going to show though the credit card charge. We do have a new feature coming down the road to pay orders by credit card. But typically you would create orders, a purchase order if you're pre-billing is real. There's not really much need if you're also doing a credit card, because the credit card you can bill that before you actually have to pay your credit card. So it's similar to a pre-bill. I do know that some do want an order for things that are coming in as a credit card, and then they just close the orders once they pull in the credit card charges. We're going to look at credit card charges, so that might help answer that question. But yes, you can technically do an order for even credit card charges, but I'm just showing the ones for the tying back to a vendor voucher. So how do you find how to change the setting? Do not see the create order under more. Make sure your estimate's approved. If your estimate's not approved, you won't see the create order. It has to be approved. If you don't have it approved, you won't, and if you're in expenses and you come here and you don't see it, you either don't have rights to add and edit orders or you don't have the estimate approved. Can you correct an order once it's approved? Well, that's security rights as far as who can unapprove, because again, these are orders are a billable item. It would depend also on whether or not it's already been billed. So if I look at these orders, can I edit after approval? Can I unapprove it? This one's already, all these are already tied to a vendor voucher. So let's see, I do have this one. Whether or not you can unapprove is security. And it will transactions get locked down if they've already been billed, if they've already been tied to a vendor voucher, all those things would matter. So can I edit it? Well, that depends on if you have the right to come in and unapprove and then come in and choose different items, different amounts, and then reapprove. Those are all security rights. And they do get locked down. You can't change type once you create it. So if you accidentally create an order with the wrong type, you would then have to just delete and recreate a new one. Can a broadcast order be created from the estimate? No, and that is media, and I'm not actually going to go into media expenses, but no. Media estimated here cannot just be created because media orders are very specific. So they do not just, and they use commission instead of markup. So they don't come from estimates here, even though you can estimate media in the estimate. So that's a great question. Okay, perfect. So we have orders. I tied one to a vendor voucher. If we look back at our budget, we're going to see where we're at budget-wise. We're going to be over because I created an order that wasn't budgeted for. So again, we're going to see that information of what did we actually estimate and what amounts have we brought in, and again by type, by whatever detail it might be. Here's the one that, oh, I did have an estimated amount there. Yeah, I'm in the same project. I have two projects. I have to make sure I'm in the same one. But yes, we can still be tracking where we're at with all of those details. Now you can see out here as your day goes through and things happen, and you can see I was trying to clean up a few things, but I have a daily feed down here too. What's gone on in this project? I've unapproved, approved, deleted some things before our call. So it's kind of keeping track of what's going on. I can come right into these projects from my daily feed. So again, it kind of highlights nice things out here for you. The next thing I am going to go into is and I'm going to go ahead and close that tab. I'm going to go ahead and just do a miscellaneous cost. These are simple. These are really for your bulk purchases that you have. Oh, and I have a question about, are we going to do a webinar for media? There's a media workflow webinar that's a past webinar that's been done. Media, because it's, you know, you can use lots of different media buying tools with Workamajig or create them in Workamajig. I don't know what details we might be having for those webinars, but there is a past media workflow webinar and I'll show you how to get back to the webinar recordings. So miscellaneous costs are really when you've had maybe some bulk purchases, maybe you have some web hosting subscriptions that you pay and then you utilize part of that for a client project. You can add those, or supplies, bulk purchases that you have as an overhead purchase that you've already created in the system. Now I want part of that going back to this project. So I can come in here and I can add those bulk items, whether it's, stock photography, web hosting services, and I can just say this is a certain amount that I want to bill back to the client related to this web hosting. Now, again, I don't believe I didn't want postage. I thought I had web hosting in there. Hosting services. Okay, so I could just say maybe I want to bill them back $500 related to this web hosting that we're doing related to their project. By the way, all the entry screens are the same. You expand or collapse the lines using these 4 arrows. That's on any type of entry. So is it billable? Now, again, if it's billable versus maybe it's billable, but I choose not to bill it, or do I not even want it to have a gross amount? I just want the cost on the project. That's up to you. And you can copy these line by line. You can create a schedule. So maybe you have, and that's true from any transaction, you can create them and schedule them monthly, weekly. That's a feature on any of these transactions, but it lets me see here's an amount that I want to bill back to the client. They don't go through an approval process. It's just putting that onto the project. And if I look here, I can now see those on my billing to say, here's the amount that we want to bill back to this client. I have a question about call out the multiple projects clients when entering the vendor invoice. Yes, your vendor invoice, when you create those, you can have multiple lines to different projects. You might be buying from one vendor. It's the line detail that connects the expense to the project. So if you do enter a vendor invoice that relates to multiple projects, um, let me just unapprove this one so we can see that. But yes, I could put this to a different project. I can say, here's another line to this vendor invoice that goes to a whole different project. It's this detail that connects the actual expense to the project. If I have a project in the header, that just means when I insert a row, I want to have that automatically populated. But yes, you can put multiple projects on one vendor expense, regardless of what type it is. Um, let's see if I can get rid of that since I have a, sorry, I keep trying to get my QA out of the way. All right, I'm going to reapprove that. Okay, so again, miscellaneous costs, just for those expenses you've already entered as overhead expenses, and now I need to relate part of that to a project to bill back the client or associate the cost to that project. Now, the expense reports I'm going to do, and then credit card charges. The expense reports are under the Everyone tab because often it's based on employees saying, hey, I paid for this out of pocket. I need to be reimbursed either via payroll or cut them a check. So expense reports are under the Everyone tab, and this is where the employees would enter that. It is based on, again, the rights to create these, and it also is based on the employee being set up from their employee record as and tying their employee record back to their vendor expense report record so that you can actually pay them. So there is some setup if you need help with that. Again, feel free to reach out to support@workamajig.com so your account manager can help you with that. But it is to simply enter those items that they purchase. If I put in again that expense webinar, no, I got a lot of expense projects. I don't have a lot of webinar projects. There we go. So again, your drop down is all, or if you know part of the name, you can type that in. What am I purchasing? Did I pay for mileage? What was the mileage that I had? And this happens to have a preset unit of 56 per miles. So what am I putting on my expense report that I need paid back for? That just does that automatic calculation. On this one, I didn't have any set markup. So what is my amount that I need paid back for? You can also, this is a yes, no. I can also come out and then just attach a receipt if I have one. Let me see if I have anything in here. I thought at one time I had a receipt in here. No, it doesn't look like I do. So we'll pretend that one of these is a receipt. If you have your receipt added to your phone or what have you, you can go in and just attach that on there. to send to them. But this just ties that expense report item to the project. Maybe I also have an expense report and it doesn't relate to any project. That's fine. Maybe I have some airfare or whatever it is. Now this list is only from your setup of expense reports and system setup. So that is specific to those. Whether or not it relates to a project would be up to you to enter. So I can just simply put in, it's probably more than that. Also a car rental expense. Um, there is a question about the taxes, the tax amount. Taxes here will come from the item setup. Could this ever be taxed? And we typically track sales tax on the client side when we bill it back to the client. That is automated based on the system setup of is it taxable and what rate, and the client holds what tax rates that they're taxed for things that we're billing back to them. If you're taxing on both sides, most don't tax or track the vendor side tax because the vendor tracks all that. But depending on your tax reporting needs, we can show that it is on the item setup. And it can be manually done. Somebody's asking, does it have to be set up on the client? Well, it automates it if you have it set up on the client already for what tax rates they need to be taxed at. If not, you would enter and put the sales tax yourself. But again, most don't do this related to vendor taxing. They just do it at the project level when they're invoicing and automate it based on what they need to tax on the client side. So happy to show that setup as you need in the system. Again, it can go down to the system setup of those items, even your labor. If you ever tax any labor, most, if you have that need, you can even set it up there. So it's a yes, no. And then what tax rate is typically set on the client to automate that. You can change it and add your own information, but it does use the system setup of tax rates needed. So I went ahead with that. If you have some that are entered out here, I'll just put another item in there. Let me just do a hotel. And if you save this and haven't finished, it just sits out here to finish up unsubmitted. You can get back to your all your expense reports here under your views to say find for me all my expense reports that I've entered based on dates and details. So you can also get to those from your global search, which is search, recent, and views. So it's also here. I have another question I think about. Yeah, it is best to set up client tax information. That's correct. And that's your rates are set up in system setup, and then your client has default taxes that can be applied. So the expense reports, can there be two levels of approval? No, not really. Same with other things. I know estimates, sometimes people want two levels. What you can do is, and again, this is based on the employee who approves my items. Do I submit it to somebody else or do I approve my own? Most would get a submit button up here, by the way. They would not. I happen to have mine entered as, I can approve my own. By the way, you can get back to details here of the um, name on this, of course, is me because I'm the one logged in, and comments, and that's under the more. But if you really need two levels of approval on certain things that do not just default that way, what you usually would want to do is come in here, look at those expense reports, maybe approve it, put your comments, and then you can unapprove and then change the approver and then send it on to a second approver. Or probably the best thing would be to go ahead and on certain things, print them and then email it to the second person and just have them maybe sign up on it that way. So there really is just one level of approval on those. And by the way, I did just open this. This really is what am I being sent for formal approval. I also am a backup on certain things, so I have some other things in here, but if I'm supposed to be approving vendor invoices, I get those things here under my notification bell. And this is also based on your system setup of how you receive things, email, system, or both. I can also come into my messages that are sent by email related to these items and look at what was sent to me by email on those things that are going through the processes of creating, approving, and needing to route those through the system for billing and paying. So again, that's the Everyone tab, expense reports to create and then route those for approval. If I come back to my purchasing today and I look at my project again, now I'm also going to see in here. And again, all the transactions, by the way, are here. What can be billed, what's approved or not will show up under the billing for those that have rights to be looking at the billing details, or obviously you mini bill from the mass billing page. But we can see all of those things coming in here. And if I look at that expense report, I can see here that I approved this expense report. I can bill the client right now, or what happens on these also is that we come in and we convert these to a vendor voucher to pay back the employee, or if we pay via payroll, we can mark them as paid. So those are coming in here under my invoices, and this says I'm ready now to take this approved expense report and convert it to a voucher so we can pay back the employee. So I can come here and create that as a vendor voucher, and then in the project it would change from an expense report status to an actual voucher. Now, this matters mainly because some people decide when to bill the client for these expenses. Do I wait till it's formally converted into a voucher, or do I bill the client even when it's in this status? And that's based on some billing settings that you can determine yourself. There's a question about vouchers, also vendor invoices. Yes, correct. A voucher is a vendor invoice, and your employee expense report can be converted to a vendor voucher. And what we do is then pay back the employee by check, or however you pay them back for these out-of-pocket expenses. So yes, it is both things. So now that is under here, as I also have another one in here that I created to pay back the employees with. So I want to make sure I get through the credit card charge expenses as well. So, I do have one more question on the expense reports. When entering, if I put in a previous date, it always defaults the date to the date being entered. I'd have to see that. If you mean, you should be able to just put the expense date will default to the today's date. Let me come back here, but you can enter whatever date you need here on the line. You can say, well, I purchased this on the 12th. It will just default to, oh, well, that just defaulted to whatever date I had up here. I'm not sure if this is what you meant on those dates, but the expense report has its own date, but what date you made the purchase and what was the date of that actual expense would be here. So that can be edited. If you're saying it converts back to something, if you can send me that detail, or your account manager, we could take a look at that. And I did have a question. If you, let me just put an amount in here so I can show that. If you needed to mark that as paid, you get that once it's approved. You'll see the option here. Once I go back into that, I can mark that as paid. Let me refresh my page. There's two ways. If I open it up here, you'll see an option here, just set as paid. So this is how you would do it, or you can individually come in and under here you can say set as paid. So that's how you would do it if you're not actually cutting a check, if you're doing that through payroll. So two ways, do I actually set as paid or do I convert it and then pay it with a check via the payment system? Yeah, great questions. So I have either of those options. Okay. All right. So again, things that need my attention. Now the credit card charges multitude ways to do that. Just to note that we do in system setup have the connection here to create your automated system to connect your um, um, oh, it's called the credit card connector. It's a holding place for all your charges to code them to projects or what items were purchased. You can come in using this Plaid. And again, if you haven't set up Plaid and aren't familiar with it, let us know because it lets you come in and connect your cards. And if it's a company that you don't see initially in there, you can still search and find and connect specific credit card companies to automate this process. It is also related to your GL setup of having credit card type accounts in there. And you generally set up a GL per card and card user. Um, yes, Plaid works with American Express and most main bank accounts, and it even works with some one-off accounts as long as they authorize that connection. It will tell you in the connection whether or not it can connect with the credentials that you have. But yes, it works with most all standard financial institutions and even again those smaller. I've connected mine to some test accounts that are not major accounts as well. So if you have any trouble with the connection, let us know. Um, I would have to double check. You can search your account. We do work with multi-currency and other accounts, so we would have to just double check with you as far as the Canadian credit card, but there shouldn't be any issue connecting with those unless your bank just doesn't allow it. So if you want some more help with the connection, let us know. Reach out to support at workamajig.com and we'll go through and even set up a call to help out. Now, mine currently is not connected automatically, but I do still have some things in here. Now, there are other ways you can bring in charges. You can just import the charge itself by importing. You can manually create. So I could come in and say, I'm just going to manually create a credit card charge. I have an account set up. I'm just going to do it one by one. You can do that easily here to just manually create them. You can import to the connector. I can come in, I can export from my bank in OFX, QFX, QuickBook X, whatever it's called, or a CSV. So you can import. The connector is a holding and it lets you say what project does this belong to? Do I want to split it? Did it pay a vendor invoice? Oh, there's a question about if you ask questions through support. No, support is there is not a charge for asking questions through support at workamajig.com. Some companies do have a process where they route them through their admin, but that's up to your system and company. But no, you can email support and we reach out as quickly as possible to help answers more detailed and then can set up calls as needed. So if I have connector charges, I can hide things already processed. We generally create the payment so I can just find things that I have not yet processed. You can see I have quite a bit of older information in there. Um, you can come in here and you can code these to a project. So whatever's been purchased, I can come in, I can say this is for a specific item. I think we have a hotel item in here, lodging. It can then determine the expense count. I don't have to know that. I can put in there what project this goes to. I'm going to go ahead and pick my webinar. The only reason you would really do specific tasks is if you're searching by, reporting by, and needing to display things on a client invoice based on tasks. Otherwise, task typically isn't required, but it can help with some details. So if I put in there the information that I want, maybe I even want to split it between projects. Maybe I want uh, 1,000 going to this project, and then I have another project, I have another second webinar. I'm going to maybe put the remaining to that project. So I can split expenses between projects. Maybe on this one, I just want 5,000. And then I have even a third project that I'm splitting this. Let's see what other webinar I have in there. I'll just do web. That's a really old one. Now, your projects would have to accept expenses, but I can split that between projects as well. And if I do split, I can edit. I can come in and say, let me change those or remove it. But it lets me split that across multiple projects and code it. And then I can come in and I can process that. So I can also, by the way, if I have multiple charges, I can change things across multiple charges in here. The charged by, the whatever it might be, the item, to simplify and streamline that. But I am going to just go ahead and process that one charge that's split between multiple. Maybe I have an item in here. Let's see, I have a couple questions and we are a little bit over time, so I'm going to wrap up soon. Okay, so we are finally bringing in an option to have a charge pay a order. We used to always require the order first to be tied to a vendor voucher. That's new. Watch for that. That will be a new detail that your account manager can help with. But we do now have an option to come in and say, and that might have even been with the last update. I don't know if I have it yet. But we will have an option here, not just an invoice, but we will have an ability to tie it to an order. So again, that should be in the recent release notes coming up. Right now, what I do is I have to say I already have it converted to a voucher and I want to pay this vendor invoice. Now, there's two ways to be tying a charge to a vendor invoice. I can do it line by line here, or I can also come out here to my vendor invoices to pay, and I can say I want to pay these. And when I pay it, I want to pay it by credit card and I want to use this credit card. So this is the other way that you can create the charge, tie it back to a vendor voucher to close that open vendor voucher. If I do it this way and it also downloads into my connector, then I just match those charges. I think you probably saw the ability to say, I've already created it manually, just match this to one I created manually. They're the same thing. It's a one-to-one match. How does it show the project subsequently the client invoice? we're not going to go down to billing and client invoices, but that would be based on how you create your client invoice and how much detail you show and what templates or layouts you use as far as how much of the transactional detail you want to show. So that would be, we can certainly help you with template and layouts if you need. How do you enter a memo that is Descript that appears in reports versus FITID? Da, 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 da. Let me see. Memo, there is a memo field. Um, oh, where is it? Charged by. Thought we had a memo field here. Am I missing it? Oh, maybe it's if I can add an attachment. Oh, here's your memo field. So you do have the FITID, but you also have a memo field that you can, this comes from the item itself from, um, its own, either your bank or the import file. Um, but you can manually enter these fields as well. How they process and go into the system is then based on the information you enter, or again, if we're just doing a manual, you get all of those fields here under show more if you have items and departments and details and want to. Once you save the initial, you can open up and edit and add the attachments and so forth. Connector charge shows as a credit card charge in the project billing. The connector charge only shows in the project once you process it. This is a holding place. These do not go to the project until you actually select it. And once it's tied to a project and you select that project and you, let me go ahead and put this project in there. Once you enter the information and you process it, then it would show up in the project. And it can go through an approval process. That's up to you. But if I look in here, I'll now see a charge in here. And it comes in as a voucher, by the way, because credit card charges are like a voucher. So there's part of the hotel that I split. Here's one of the credit card charges for photography. So yes, once you process it, it becomes the transaction. Um, we cannot see those memos on reports. We can help you with what's available on the data set and reports if you want to email specifically. What's available under your views here. I don't know if we can add memos. I thought we had like memo fields here, maybe not, but we might be able to go to another data set that has line details for you. We can certainly help out with some of the report needs that you have. And again, I know we're a bit over, so processing through the connector will create yes, processing from the connector is what actually creates the expense in the system and ties it, if it's related to a project, it would tie it to the project. And then what we do is once those are all approved, we come out and of course, this is the accounting side. What do we need to pay? That's all part of the accounting of paying, receiving. But you can see everything that's approved that comes out here, what needs attention, what needs to be submitted for approval. All the details are on your purchasing today, and everything's being tied back nicely to the project. Now I'm probably way over on my budget with what I created versus what I budgeted, but that's the nice thing about it is it quickly shows you once I open this up, where are we at against our budgeted details. Now, if I look here, I have this total budget, but then I have, outside costs, inside costs, which are your miscellaneous costs, and then I still have some open order information. So again, if I look at the overall budget, I'm probably a bit over the total amount versus all the gross amounts that I've entered. Oh, maybe I'm not too bad. So again, who's going to track that detail in the budget analysis and projects would typically be your project manager. All right. Well, great questions. I know we did go over a little bit, but I'm happy to, we can help you out still after the call. If you want to email, again, support, that goes directly to your account manager. Just another note, when you come into that support guide and you come to the main screen, there's the videos and webinars. If you click or even search up here webinars, if you click here, you can follow this page and you'll get emails when there's new upcoming and newly posted videos. And by the way, this one will be posted probably later today or tomorrow. So when you click here, you'll see that come in here at the top pretty soon. There are other previous webinars. You can view these at your leisure. So, come in, take a look. I will try to find out. I know there's a question about if we'll be doing media. There was a media workflow previously. I saw it. I don't know exactly where. Here's one that we did on media workflow. But again, media is pretty complex. So we might have to just get calls for you if you have more specific detailed one-on-one calls that you want. Certainly let us know. We'd like to help make the system efficient, and we'd like to make it so that it is easier for you and makes your work easier, not harder. So again, that's why we're here. Reach out to us and we'll help coordinate some calls that you want for setting up Plaid, setting up the expense tracking. Let us know. We'd be happy to help. And again, email questions as well. There's a chat that you can use. There's some phone support that is we try to get to when available. So let us know. We'd like to make sure your system is working well for you and that again, it's making things efficient and easy, not harder. And I did see one last note. If you're not using the connector, um, we would like to, we do not have Plaid. Plaid is a third party, by the way. It's a third party system that we integrate with. So you should have the ability to set up Plaid and then find out if it will connect to your bank. And if not, again, we can certainly import other ways. There is another import screen either from the connector, so you can go straight to credit card charges here to import or the credit card connector. So there's lots of ways to pull in charges to help make that efficient for you and tie them to whatever they need to be tied to. So, all right. Thank you all very much for joining and appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn some more about Workamajig. I hope it was helpful. And again, we're still here. Reach out with some additional detailed questions that you have for your specific company, and we'll certainly continue to help out with any of the expense tracking. All right. Oh, and I saw one last chat. Oh, okay. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.